welcome. It is that time of year to tell winter stories, particularly at Christmas. And there's one particular tale that I'm asked for everywhere I go, and so I offer it this time. It's a Christmas carol. You may be familiar with it. Before we begin, let me address one particular word, which arrives very early in the story, and if you're not a Londoner and very familiar, you may not have heard change as a nickname. The word change, what do you think of? Is it the change in your purse, a change in your life? In this case, it's short for the Royal Exchange, which is the centre of finance and trade for the whole empire. And so, when I mention it, you'll know what it means. Now, Marley was dead to begin with. There was no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it. And Scrooge's name was good upon change for anything he chose to put his hand to. Old Marley was dead as a doornail. Now, Scrooge knew he was dead. Of course he did. How could it be otherwise? Scrooge and he had been partners for I don't know how many years. Scrooge was his sole executor, his sole administrator, his sole assign, his sole residuary legatee, his sole friend, his sole mourner. Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name, however. There it yet stood, years afterward, above the warehouse door, Scrooge and Marley. Now, the firm was known as Scrooge and Marley, and some people knew that the business called Scrooge, sometimes Marley. He answered to both names. It was all the same to him. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, was Scrooge. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. External heat and cold had little influence on him. No warmth could warm him, no cold could chill him. No wind that blew was better than he. No falling snow more intent upon its purpose. In fact, foul weather didn't know where to have him. Why, the heaviest rain and snow and hail and sleet could boast of advantage over him in one respect. They often came down handsomely. He never did. Nobody ever stopped him in the street to say with gladsome looks, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?" No children ever asked him what it was o'clock. No beggars implored him for a trifle. And no man or woman in all his life ever asked the way to such and such a place of Scrooge. The blind men's dogs seemed to know when he was coming, and they dragged their owners into doorways and up courts, and then would wag their tail as if they said, "No eyes are better than evil eyes, eh, Dark Master?" But what did Scrooge care? It's the very thing he liked, to edge his way along the crowded paths of life, warning human sympathy to keep its distance. Once upon a time, of all the good days of the year upon Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting-house. It was cold, bleak, biting, foggy weather. The city clocks had only just gone 3, and it was quite dark out already. Now, the door to Scrooge's counting-house was open, that he might keep his eye upon his clerk, who sat in a little cell beyond, a sort of tank, copying letters. Now, Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it appeared to be one coal. But he couldn't replenish it, for no sooner did the clerk come in with the shovel than Scrooge predicted that it would be necessary for them to part. At which point the clerk would put on his comforter and try to warm himself over a candle, in which endeavour, not being a man of strong imagination, he failed. "A Merry Christmas, Uncle, God save you," cried a cheerful voice. It was the voice of Scrooge's nephew, who came upon him so quickly that it was the first intimation Scrooge had of his approach. "Bah," he said, "humbug. Christmas a humbug on? You don't mean that, I'm sure." "I do. Out upon Merry Christmas. What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without any money? A time for finding yourself a year older and not an hour richer? A time for balancing your books and having every item to a round dozen of months presented dead against you? If I had my will, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled in his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart. He should. Uncle, nephew, keep Christmas in your own way and let me keep it in mine. Keep it, but you don't keep it. Oh, let me leave it alone then. Much good it'll do you. Much good it's ever done you. Now, there are many things, Uncle, from which I might have derived good, by which I have not profited, I dare say. Christmas among the rest. But I've always thought of Christmas time, when it's come round, apart from the veneration due its sacred origin, if anything belonging to it can be apart from that, yes, as a good time. A kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. It's the only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women seem by one consent to open up their shut-up hearts more freely and to think of people beneath them as if they really were fellow travellers to the grave and not some other race of creatures on other journeys. And therefore, Uncle, though it's never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I say that it has done me good and it will do me good, and I say God bless it, with the clerk in the tank involuntarily applauded. Another word out of you and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation. You're a very powerful speaker, sir. It's a wonder you don't go into Parliament. There, Uncle, don't be angry. Come, dine with us tomorrow. Scrooge said that he would see him. Oh, yes. In fact, he went the whole length of the expression and told him he'd see him in that extremity first. But why? Cried Scrooge's nephew. Why? Well, why did you get married? Well, because I fell in love. Because you fell in love, growled Scrooge, as if it was the only one thing in the world more ridiculous than Merry Christmas. Hey, you never came to see us before that happened, Uncle. Why give it as an excuse for not coming now? Yeah, good afternoon. I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why can we not be friends? Good afternoon. I'm sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute, Uncle. We've never had any quarrel to which I've ever been a party. But I've made my trial in homage to Christmas, and I'll keep it till the last. So Merry Christmas, Uncle. Good afternoon, and a Happy New Year. Good afternoon. The nephew left the room without an angry word notwithstanding, and the clerk, in letting the nephew out, let two other people in. They were portly gentlemen, very pleasant to behold, and now stood with their hats off in Scrooge's office. They had books and papers in their hand, and they bowed to him. Scrooge and Marley's, I believe. Do I have the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley? Mr. Marley's been dead these 7 years. Died 7 years ago this very night. Well, at this festive time of year, Mr. Scrooge, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute, who suffer very greatly at the present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessaries. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comforts, sir. Are there no prisons? Plenty of prisons, sir, but under the impression that they scarcely furnish Christian cheer of mind and body to the unoffending multitudes, a few of us are endeavouring to raise a fund to buy some meat and drink and means of warmth for the poor. We choose this time because it is a time above all others when want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. What shall we put you down for, sir? Nothing. Oh, you wish to remain anonymous. I wish to be left alone. Since you ask what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I help to support the prisons and the workhouses. They cost enough. Those who are poorly off must go there. Many can't go there, sir, and many would rather die. Well, if they'd rather die, then they'd better do it. Help decrease the surplus population. Well, at length the hour came for the shutting of the counting-house, and with an ill-will Scrooge, dismounting from his stool, admitted the fact to the clerk in the tank, who put on his hat and snuffed out his candle. You'll want all day tomorrow, I suppose? If it's quite convenient, sir. It's not convenient, and it's not fair. If I was to stop half a crown for it, you'd think yourself mightily ill-used, I'll be bound. Yes, sir. And yet you don't make me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work. It's only once a year, sir. That's a poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. But I suppose you must have the whole day. Very well. Be here all the earlier the next morning. The clerk promised that he would, and Scrooge walked out with a growl. The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, with the long ends of his white comforter dangling below his waist, for he boasted no greatcoat, went down the slide at the end of the lane 20 times with the boys in honour of it being Christmas Eve, and then ran home as fast as he could pelt to play at blind man's buff with his own children.